AMANA Voice, the voice of trust. Brought to you by the American Muslim Association of North America. Each and every Sunday evening at 6 p.m. Each week we will bring to you issues confronting our community. Join us this Sunday at 6 p.m. for AMANA Voice, the voice of trust. Brought to you by your Muslim neighbors on WTPS 1080 AM, the People's Station.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful.
الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين.
Praise be to Allah, Lord of the worlds, the Beneficent, the Merciful, Owner of the Day of Judgment. Thee alone we worship, Thee alone we ask for help. Show us the straight path, the path of those whom Thou hast favored, not the path of those who earn Thine anger, nor of those who go astray.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. I'd like to welcome you to Amana, the voice of trust, brought to you by the American Muslim Association of North America. My name is Brother Kamal, and tonight, inshallah, we have a wonderful program outlined for you. We will be discussing the life and mission of Dr. Martin Luther King and the Islamic perspective on that, inshallah. We'd like to introduce our. Hold on, I'd like to welcome Brother Sufyan on the program. Assalamu alaikum, Brother Sufyan. How are you doing?
Alaikum salam. Peace be upon you. Tonight we will be the issue about Islam and the vision of Dr. Martin Luther King, and I hope you will enjoy the relationship between the religion of Islam and the vision of Dr. Martin Luther King.
Brother Sufyan, before we go into the program, I know you have a food drive coming up very soon. I'd like you to tell us a little bit about that. And if any of our listeners would like to contribute or donate to this program.
Yeah. Like every Sunday, we try to encourage all our listeners, please be part of this noble cause, project of downtown Miami. We have really dedicated students from University of Miami and other Islamic centers collecting food items and clothing to the homeless in South Florida. Please, if you can be part of this great mission, just contact us at 305-898-9314. 305-898-9314. You can be working with them hand by hand, and you can donate food items and other means to make the mission successful. It's been so successful lately. More people been covered, more homeless been covered, and we are seeing a lot of success in that operations.
Yeah. Now, can you tell us a little bit about your free literature on the religion of Islam also?
Okay, AMANA, as you know, the American Muslim Association of North America, as we mentioned before, we try to outreach to the Muslims and to the non-Muslims. We provide education programs such this radio program, and we provide free literatures, free books, and the Quran in different languages. The main purpose of that is we try to get closer to our community members, especially our neighbors, and we live in the same society, and we should live together in peace because we all depend on our relationship for a better society, for a healthier society. And as you know, after 9/11 and with all these events internationally and domestic, Muslims, we always urge our Muslim members to work harder to outreach to non-Muslim and to be part of the solution, not part of the problem, by trying to work in the prevention and to be working in the education program with other community members to have a better society, a better community, and a stronger America in the end. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Brother Sufyan. Tonight in our program, inshallah, God willing, we will like to discuss Islam and the mission of Dr. Martin Luther King. And we have two guests in our studios tonight, and also Imam Nasser Ahmed. He'll be patched in through the phone lines. We have with us Brother Ishab visiting us once more. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be with you, Brother Ishab, and welcome.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
And we have Dr. Brown, and seeing that we weren't able to introduce each other before the program, I'd like you to give us an introduction. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Dr. Brown.
Well, thank you. I have been involved in the civil rights movement in the United States for over 40 years. I did have the opportunity to march twice with Dr. King during the 1960s. So I have a long history of involvement in the civil rights movement. I'm a past president of the Miami-Dade branch of the NAACP, and I'm currently first vice president of the Miami-Dade branch. By profession, I'm a marine scientist. I have worked with Sofian on the Florida Advisory Committee to the United States Commission on Civil Rights. At one time I chaired it. I also chaired the Massachusetts Committee, and I served also on the Oklahoma Committee back in the 1960s. So I have a long history there. I do also spent a great deal of time working in Africa. I'm a marine scientist by profession, and I'm retired, but I still make several trips a year. In fact, I'll be making one shortly, and I have, through that experience, had a great deal of contact with the Islamic community in West Africa, and to some degree in East Africa as well, in places such as Kenya.
I'm really happy to see you today, Brother Brad. I would like to ask you about, I know that you also involved in this coming Thursday rally for Darfur. Please, can you tell us full information about it? We would like to encourage the people to come and participate in such great rally coming up.
Thank you. There will be a rally concerning the situation in Darfur on Thursday between 11 and 2 at the west side of the Miami-Dade government building, what we often call the 111 building on Northwest 1st Street. It is a large number of organizations participating. It's coordinated by the Miami-Dade Community Relations Board, which I chaired at one time. The NAACP is part of that, and in fact, we're very proud that the National Director of International Affairs for the NAACP will be one of the featured speakers who will be coming down from Washington for that rally. Darfur is a difficult situation. It's a situation of conflict. It's a situation that has a lot of historic roots. It's a complicated situation. But the fact of the matter is that you cannot deal with solving some of those problems when, in fact, you're in the middle of strife. And what we have is a situation where several 100,000 people have been killed.
It's about 400,000, huh?
Right.
Yeah.
Over 2 million people are refugees. And as always, it's women and children that suffer most under those kind of circumstances.
Yeah.
It crosses an artificial border with Chad, which are the same people because that border was established by Britain and France. The African Union and some of the African leaders, such as President Obasanjo of Nigeria, President Wade of Senegal, have taken a great deal of effort in leading to this. There are about 8,000 peacekeeping troops of the African Union there, but they don't have the resources or the ability to do this. They need the entire world, including the United States, to step up to the plate and involve more effectively the United Nations and get peace started, and then begin to resolve some of the issues of strife between that area, which at one time in the Middle Ages was a very powerful kingdom. Actually, it tended all the way the other side of the Nile. It wasn't always a place of refugee camp and starving people.
Yes.
But and there are militias there, and militias, as we learned in Serbia and Bosnia, armies are not always well disciplined, even the very best. But militias tend to be completely undisciplined, and things such as rape and things like that have been used as weapons, just as they were in Serbia and Bosnia. And that stop has to be put to that violence before the issues can be really dealt with.
Yes.
What do you think about this rally? I mean, what's the outcomes might come from such rally?
Well, we hope that this will be part of not just something happening here, but rallies around the country that will put a greater pressure on the United States to become involved. We can put more pressure on China. China, of course, is very much into the oil in the area. We've been, as the United States, perhaps less concerned, in part because the regular government of Sudan has been very helpful in the issues on terrorism to the United States. But you can't have children going hungry, women being raped. You've got to come to some kind of agreement, peace, and we want the United States to pull its full weight behind the United Nations. It's not a unilateral issue, no. It's an issue of bringing the United Nations to bear, to back and cooperate with the leaders in the African Union to establish peace, and then hopefully negotiations and some sort of an accommodation with an area that has been neglected.
And that's good that it shows that the American public will send a message saying no to the violence in that area.
That's right.
And I hope we can make more rallies also to other areas in the world where there's a lot of violence going on in the same time, like in Iraq and other
Yes,
countries.
you stop the violence, then you can begin to deal with issues at which people have legitimate grievances, and there are
always the
rights on both sides.
Also, always who's paying for all that is children and weak people.
Right.
Weak people. Yeah.
Elderly, women.
Women. And
Yes.
Dr. Brown, with all the struggles that's going on in that part of the world, what are these people actually fighting for? What are their aims and purposes? And I know most of them are actually fighting each other, that they live together for a long period of time, and now you have that strife and struggles there. What are their demands?
Well, it's a little complicated, but first, back in history, when England took over most of that area, Darfur had been pretty much an independent region. England was concerned that Darfur was maybe getting a little bit close to the Ottoman Empire, and essentially subsumed Darfur under Khartoum, which was the capital. As a result, following from that region has been neglected. So in terms of development and resources, people in that region have some legitimate grievances of not receiving the full attention of the government. There were some revolutionary movements started. They conquered some of the stations that the regular army had there. The Sudan army at that time, it's getting more money now because of oil, was fairly weak, and they turned to militias of some of the groups that were primarily pastoralists. And these militias had been used in the South when Sudan needed help, and they were turned loose, and that began most of the strife. But there's about 3 revolutionary groups. One of them is actually a group that used to be part of the main government, has broken away, and there's some confusion, and it's exactly, it's conflict over power. But there are legitimate grievances of a neglected region.
Yes.
But it isn't going to be solved by having people. There's an environmental factor as well, too, because one of the reasons that pastoral people have always conflicted with farming people. Western movies get made about, the homesteader versus the cattleman.
Right. Yes.
Right? Because it's what has happened with desertification and the drought is that conflict has been increasing because the area and the resources have been shrinking.
Right.
Yes.
So but they do live together. They've been living together for a long time, and they've had accommodations over conflicts and differences, and have generally worked them out. They're a little more difficult now because of the shrinking land base, but all of a sudden we've got weapons. People have, instead of single-shot rifles that they had for a long time, now they've got,
The automatic weapons.
like our streets in Miami, instead of the things that people used a generation ago, they can now spray lead all over the place.
Yeah.
And so they have those kinds of efforts, and that's done. But these are folks who have reached accommodations over most of their history.
Yes.
Yes.
Now, I'd like to ask you a question concerning Dr. Martin Luther King and the movement back then, because you marched twice with Dr. Martin Luther King and the movement. That's pretty amazing. I would like to find out from you, seeing that you experienced, some of the situations back then, what was the condition of the society back then at that time that had to give rise to a man like Martin Luther King and to such a great movement that has done so much for civil rights up to this day?
Well, we had a system in this country in which we had legal apartheid in much of the southern part of the country. The rules were separate in each state. In some cases, they were separate in each, different from one town to the other. But they were, literally to the extreme. In the state of Oklahoma, for example, you had to have separate public telephone booths. And, in theory, according to the courts, this went under the issue of separate but equal. But I remember going to a rural black school in Alabama back in that time where equal meant inside toilets and modern plumbing in a white school and 2 paths into the woods in the black school. So, that kind of differences was very rigid. It was enforced by terrorism. It was enforced by lynching. It was enforced by rape, just as we've seen in these issues here, where a black woman, no way she could bring an accusation of rape against a white man and expect it to go to court. And a black man, even the hint that he might have thought of rape could result in lynching and beating. Emmett Till was killed for maybe just stuttering. Nobody really knows what he did, but but it was presumed that he was not deferential enough to a white woman in Mississippi, and he was, brutally destroyed. So in the North, we didn't have legal segregation, but you had much of that in terms of the private sector enforced by practice. And, we just come out of a World War II where we had a segregated army that began to break down and at the end of the Korean War. And a lot of the real push came from the returning veterans coming back from World War II that began to set the stage for what happened in the 60s as people began to stand up, as people did all over the world. This was part of the movement of, this is the 50th anniversary of Ghana's independence. This is where the colonies, where India became independent for Britain. The the old colonial empires were dissolving. The political situation in the U.S. is, how could we go to the United Nations and talk about godless communism and turn around and have a diplomat driving from Washington to New York through Maryland and not be able to stop and use the bathroom if they were of darker hue?
Yes.
So all of this came together, and King was the right person in the right place that gave voice to that movement, and gave voice in a way that spoke to all of the country, and put his life on the line daily, gave his life eventually, limiting not just it. And this is King was, we think of King as a civil rights leader, and he was, but he saw the connection to economics. He died while fighting for garbage men, for dignity and for decent wages.
Yes.
He got his greatest criticism when he spoke out against the Vietnam War, and said, I cannot talk about peace and nonviolence in the United States. And sometimes we lose that when we made a holiday and we talk about his dream. He didn't get shot for dreaming. He got shot for being an activist and speaking out. And I think we need to realize and think that about him when we remember his day.
Good point.
Yeah. We have a guest from the previous program. We'd like to introduce yourself.
Ted Lyons from The
Ted,
Truth
yes.
of the Matter.
How you doing, Ted?
I'm doing fantastic.
Yes.
I just came.
I know
to
you're
sit in-
edging to voice your opinion. Talk a little bit about the topic.
Well, that's what I wanted to hear because I just got the tail end from our good friend Dr. Brown, who's a big fighter in the community, and I saw him here, so I know it must have been a very important topic. So go ahead and give me a little more, and I'll pick up on it.
Now, what other figures were there supporting Dr. Martin Luther King that we may not know about, but played a very influential role in the civil rights movement at that time?
Well, you have to remember, there were many people, thousands of people. Right here in Miami, for example, we had Father Gibson, who was president of the NAACP, whose name is on a Supreme Court case because the Minnie McCarthy Commission of the Florida State Legislature was out to find communists under every Bush, wanted the membership list. And, of course, one of the things they were after was to be able to fire teachers.
Uh-huh.
And he refused to give that membership list and was ready to go to jail. But fortunately, that was established at the Supreme Court level, and he didn't. Dr. John O'Brown is another Miamian.
Reverend Graham. Reverend Graham was a big friend of Dr. King.
We had, and Dr. King used to come to Miami to relax.
Oh, yeah.
Use Virginia Key Beach.
Oh, yeah.
Stay in the Hampton House.
Stay at the Hampton House, yeah.
So this was where he often came to relax. He never led a march here, but he was very much in contact with leaders that we've just mentioned.
Of the black community,
in the community that led towards the desegregation efforts.
And the Jewish
here in
community was a big help for during Dr. King time because they would help finance the movement, and they was a big contributor to helping desegregate America, and we have to give them they applause and they props for that because I feel like they was part of the movement to a certain extent.
Yes. Okay, Brother Ishab.
Yes, sir. I would like to ask the doctor a question about the atmosphere between Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King and his relationship with the political power structure in the black community at that time. I understand that the power brokers in the black community did not support him in his position in Vietnam. Could you give us some comments on that?
Certainly. First of all, while there were thousands of people who became involved in the civil rights movement, many people never did. If everybody who said they walked across the bridge at Selma actually walked across, the bridge would have collapsed. And one of the reasons I made a point of saying I walked with them twice, I don't want to make you think that I walked through them 20 times because that tends to be what people tend to think back in that. Many churches, the Black Baptist Convention split into the Progressive Baptist Convention away from the National Baptist Convention because the established church did not want to support King's fight in the street. And then when he became opposed to the Vietnam War, this became extremely controversial within the black community, within many people who had been very much civil rights fighters. The NAACP did not support that. Right. And they used in part the argument that, and with some legitimacy, that one of their tasks was to look for equal treatment to the black soldiers in Vietnam. And that of course, King lost his access to the White House, to Johnson, overtaking the stand under Vietnam. King was many of the politicians, as many politicians do. So I think John Kennedy said politics is the art of the practical. It's what you make possible. King was a moral leader and didn't make those kind of compromises to that kind of degree, and time has proven him correct. But yes, to a large extent, those who were involved in the political structure, those who were part of there, saw, if we go against the war and we do it here, we won't be able to do this over here, whether it's getting started in the war on poverty, for example, and people who are beginning to start Head Starts and things like that. We won't be able to do that if we oppose the government on the war. So it was an extremely controversial move on his part within the black community to do this.
I'd like to ask a follow-up question with the doctor. Another comment that I read about some of the statements that Dr. Martin Luther King made was a statement, this is pertaining to Vietnam once again, where it says, the quote is, "America is the greatest purveyor of violence in the world," unquote. And then a comment made by President Johnson at the time, where, and you can confirm this if the statement was made, because it must have created a big uproar. The statement was made by the president at the time. It says, quote, "That goddamn nigger preacher," unquote, made by the President Johnson at the time. Is there any truth to that comment?
The general understanding is that Johnson's, when he got upset, his language reverted right back to the language he grew up with, and that was the language he grew up with. Johnson did an awful lot to move civil rights forward in this country. He fell down on Vietnam, but his personal, concerns in that
was there.
No I don't think there was any
question.
Any real question about that. That was his
personal.
That was his background. That was what he did. When he got pushed, that's what he worked out for. I don't think that takes anything away from what he achieved in civil rights, but I think that's certainly part of the reality.
So from my own understanding, that statement does not really reflect his relationship with Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. It was just the kind of language that he used and his style, but it wasn't a personal comment, was it?
Well, I think it was more of I don't know. I'm not a psychologist, that's for sure. But Johnson was the kind of person that would, sit on a toilet and call people in on his staff and chew them out. His language was very, very much that. And certainly he was mad. And I don't, from his background, I'm glad he achieved. We got what we did under his statement. You would not have heard that language under Jack Kennedy, because Jack Kennedy was brought up in a different kind of environment that said, no matter how you feel. I don't mean that he didn't think, as most of us were brought up, white supremacy is driven into everybody's head. But he would have been told by his parents, don't use language like that. Johnson would have never been told that. But Kennedy backed off of civil rights when he got in there because he wanted to compromise. He put terrible judges in place. We got our desegregation rulings because of Eisenhower judges,
right.
My Republican friend over here. Kennedy put horrible judges because he put the people in Mississippi that Senator Eastland nominated to put in there so he could get the rest of his program.
And they came up with some real strong voting acts
So Kennedy, I remember one of the first things I did, and I come from Kennedy's home country.
Okay, we're coming up on a break right now. Stay tuned. We'll be right back on with Ted, Dr. Brown, and Brother Ishab.
Al-Amana Voice radio program is sponsored by As-Salam Mediterranean Halal Markets, one of the largest halal market in Florida where you can purchase all you need for Middle Eastern grocery products. You can find a large selection of Islamic books and gift items. As-Salam Mediterranean Halal Market is located at University and Sunrise Boulevard at the northeast corner. Telephone 954-916-6266. Muhammad Halal Meat Markets, the source for all your halal beef, lamb, goats, chicken, and turkey. Muhammad Halal has a great source of Caribbean products. You can also find a large selection of Islamic books and gift items. Muhammad Halal Market is located at 3810 South State Road 7 at 411 in Miramar. Telephone 954-963-9154. Graphic Express and Printing Solutions. If you're looking for high quality of blueprint scanning and plotting, digital copy center, printing services, typing services, fax and notary, and graphic design, visit the location in Miami, 16221 Northwest 57th Avenue. Telephone 305-628-3838. American Fire Sprinkler System. For inspections, maintenance, services, and design and installation, contact the American Fire Sprinkler System at telephone 305-628-0100. The Crime Stoppers of Miami-Dade County. Be part of reducing the crime in Miami-Dade County by visiting their website at www.crimestoppersmiami.com or by calling the hotline number 305-471-TIPS. Remember, together we do make a difference. Finally, we would like to mention that Amana offers free translation of the Quran copies in English, Spanish, or in French. Also, free books on Islam. Send your request to Amana fax number 305-945-0399 or by email to info@al-amana.org. To learn more about Amana, the American Muslim Association of North America, please visit Amana website at www.al-amana.org. If you need a copy of today's program, or if you have any questions, concerns, tips, or suggestions, email us at
Assalamu alaikum, peace be with you. I'd like to welcome you once more to Amana, the voice of trust, brought to you by the American Muslim Association of North America. In our studios tonight, we have Ted from Truth of the Matter. We have Dr. Brown with us and Brother Ishab. And I don't know if we are able to get Dr. Nasser on the air. Are we, Brother Sufyan? Okay. And we're discussing the mission of Dr. Martin Luther King. And I'd like to ask the brothers who have all the experience on this topic, tell us a little bit about Dr. Martin Luther King's vision. What was his vision all about? And let's talk about from the time that his vision was implemented till now, what has happened during this time? And where are we from the time he has implemented this vision?
Very good question, Dr. Brown.
Yes.
Well, I think that King had a world vision. Yeah. It was most evident in what he said about Vietnam.
Uh-huh.
And it's, I think that he'd look out and see the conflicts in Afghanistan, Iraq, the Palestine-Israeli issues, the issue in Darfur, and I think this would occupy a great deal of his concern and attention, because I think he looked at this as a worldwide level. He was very much concerned about it. The Poor People's March was what he was planning.
Absolutely.
So the idea of the economic, the inequalities, the fact that we have a city of Miami here today that, we have the most palatial homes of the movie stars and the magnates, athletes, and yet we have a
he's
inability to deal with the tremendous gap of wealth and income and opportunities that exist to people here. I think he would look out at the issue that is so often raised in the Islamic communities here, that all of a sudden we're seeing racial profiling and the kind of prejudice of people who reacted to the 9/11 and to some of the language that went around, I think, even in terms of our early invasion of Iraq. I think he'd be very strong on that kind of issue. I think he'd see that, yes, that there have been changes, but that we haven't got it. There are so many people that have been left behind. There are so many things still out there that I don't think he would be very much satisfied.
Yes, I think that from the time I've learned about Dr. Martin Luther King and his vision, I think along the line somebody have dropped the ball. Either the civil rights movement have not done enough to accomplish his goals and his mission from then till now. I mean, this is my own personal belief coming from the islands, coming to America and seeing the situation of the African Americans now as it is, and the time between his mission and how much he struggled for, civil rights and for equality.
Right. Well, Dr. King's vision was for all people to be to be equal, I believe, and his civil rights vision was one that I believe come once in a lifetime. I mean, kind of like Jesse Jackson's and Al Sharpton's and the leaders today. They can't get the whole masses of the nation to support the kind of issue that Dr. King was carrying, which was a civil rights issue. It superseded everybody. It was something that was right for America, for the world. And I think that's the difference. When you start talking about, we need to have one particular thing. Well, maybe one race might think you do, but the other race might think maybe that's not the type of thing, if you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, but I think we need to also look at it when compared to the successes came, and I don't mean to downplay them. I mean, I would not be here today, and neither would most everybody in this room sitting in this, if we had not ended legal segregation in the United States.
Right.
And Dr. King was very much effective in gathering the general support across the country to turn those laws and changes around and say that we couldn't say it. But it also matched what was happening in foreign policy, the Cold War, and all the other things. When Dr. King went to Chicago and tried to deal with slum housing and tried to deal with open housing in places like Cicero, didn't make much progress.
Right.
And so, I'm not sure that if he were, his eloquence is tremendous, but I'm not sure that when we say that leaders like other leaders have not been able to address some of those issues, when King moved north, it didn't work very well.
Right.
And it all of a sudden, people who were Northerners who were certainly not going to stand and support segregated lunch counters and all those kinds of things, weren't about to address the issues of housing equity and housing opportunities in their neighborhoods.
Right.
I mean, it was very clear in much of the North at that time that people were, and maybe that's the way change sometimes happens. It was able to it was much easier to be in favor of change somewhere else than it was to look in your own backyard.
See, as a Muslim, we are as also immigrant. I came to this country first to Ohio in 1977, and we didn't know before Martin Luther King, and we didn't know any of those great civil rights leaders. By the years, especially the past 10 years, I've been working with the civil rights, and we start to understand more Martin Luther King and his vision and his call. As a matter of fact, we feel, all of us, we share the same feeling as Muslims and Arabs, that it's so familiar, his vision. As a matter of fact, myself, I consider Martin Luther King, he didn't bring something new. Actually, to us, he is a reminder that something came 1400 years ago. Right. And things came even by Jesus, by Moses, that, we read the same thing. This week especially reminding also what's the vision. And this is a blessing that every year, and I don't agree that we should have it like Mother Day or every year. We should always have reminding our children, like not every day, but in weekly basis, monthly basis, about what should we do by the vision of Martin Luther King, especially. It's like a reminder. It's a reminder because our prophet, peace be upon him, 1400 years ago, the first thing he came, like what you just said, Dr. Brown, he equalized he said there is no difference between Arabs, because he came to the Arabs first. Mm-hmm. There is no difference between the Arabs and non-Arabs, which is meant the West and the Persian and the European. And he said there is no difference between the poor and the rich. As a matter of fact, one of the great stories that the leaders of that area, the richest and the leaders, they came to him. They said, we give you the money. We give you the wives. We give you everything. Just ignore these servants. Ignore these poor people. We can't. We are so in a great status. Why should we sit down with these slaves and these poor people and these and the people with the color and this and this? And the Prophet, peace be on him, came order from God that do not take this offers and stick with the mission of Islam, which is equal between people, brought the rights for women. And this is the reason I want to repeat that we really also love Martin Luther King as Muslims, because we feel it was a reminding also to us, for us, that he's bringing again what really our prophet brought 1400 years ago.
But Ishab, yes. You want to talk about that famous story about...
Yes, sir. And I would like to preference my comments opening saying that Prophet Muhammad, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King has become much of a mystical figure. And much of his achievements have been, as great as his achievements have been, just like Brother Sufyan said, it was a continuation of what was prior to his existence. And his successes, I would have to say, had a lot to do with the presence of Malcolm X. In 1965, a statement that was made while Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King was in the Selma, Alabama jail, Malcolm X was quoted as having said to Coretta Scott King, he says, if the white people realize what the alternative is, perhaps they would be more willing to listen to Dr. King. In other words, he's telling them, he says, you either listen to me or Dr. King. You have a choice. And it seems as though the power brokers decided that Martin Luther King was a better person, and his approach to civil rights was more formidable because it was more agreeable to the power brokers. So although Martin Luther King achieved quite a bit, it was pretty much, it seems to me, a lot to do with the alternative to Martin Luther King was Malcolm X. Right. So either way you want to go, you go with Malcolm X's way, which is pretty much more of a justice for peace concept. If you want peace, give me justice. There is no turning of the cheek. If you fight fire with fire type of an approach. However, Martin Luther King was like more of a more passive, or let's say nonviolent approach.
But don't forget, we had from 1865 at the end of the Civil War, blacks had been in slavery for up 350 years, and it took the from 1865 for Emancipation Proclamation all the way up until 1965 when Dr. King started his crusade in the 60s. He finally broke the chains of the Jim Crow laws and the separate but equal laws and the laws that really stop our civil rights. The beginning of us having the civil rights that we have, and I still don't think we completely at some point have full civil rights. We have the law, but all the time it's spread it out across the country and it never followed. I think Frederick Douglass said it best when he said, when they called Frederick Douglass in Maryland after the Civil War and asked him, said, well, what do the Negro do now? And he said, give them fair play and leave them alone, but we never really got the fair play. So Dr. King came at a time where we had gone through the Jim Crow, the lynching, all of the things that happens for people to take away their rights. So he came at a time where the whole world understood the plight of the blacks, and it was basically easy to follow, I think, now under his crusade. So I don't know whether my point is I don't know whether Malcolm X was the cause. He certainly was the alternative, but I think the world picked up on the crusade of nonviolence was the right way to move. Is what I'm saying.
My comments though is that there's really nothing new in what Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King presented. Just like it is written in Ecclesiastic verses 1, number 9, it says, "What has been will be again. What has been done will be done again, and that there is nothing new under the sun." That's Ecclesiastic 1:9. Statement coming out of the Torah. So what we find of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King is a confirmation of a truth. Anytime you have a person who's speaking the truth, it's a confirmation of something that was before him. He doesn't come up with anything new. It's a continuation. So Martin Luther King was achieved much in his life, much honor, much respect, and much achievement in terms of, and he continues. It's amazing how, for all the years that he's been dead, he continues to achieve more. Just like right now, he's being honored in the Washington Monument. He's one of 4 people that's ever been a monument built. Right. I think it's Jefferson, Lincoln, George Washington. Okay, and then now King. So he continues to produce new things, but it's nothing new under the sun, though. His goal was much the same as Gandhi and Malcolm X and Marcus Garvey and Jesus and Puff Muhammad. May Allah be pleased with both Jesus and Puff Muhammad. He wanted justice and peace. Justice happens to be truth in action. It is not just simply to say, I want something in exchange for nothing. You have to exchange justice for peace. If you want peace, you have to give justice. And the exchange between justice for peace is how you get the result. Let me go further and just say that Martin Luther King implemented the American dream. He said that we must get rid of, once and for all, we must get rid of the concept of superiority of the races. Now, this is a direct compatibility to what was said 1,400 years ago by Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. May Allah be pleased with him. Prophet Muhammad had a very strict belief that justice has to coexist with peace, and that if you don't get the justice, then you would fight for it. Okay, and that is the difference between the revelation of Prophet Muhammad, may Allah be pleased with him, and also the revelation of Jesus, that Jesus wanted the love. Okay, then Prophet Muhammad came and he brought the love with the justice. So it's a continuation. Reverend Martin Luther King happened to go back to the peace concept, and therefore the justice is still being fought for. See, so you had the peace, and you want to say, like, kill me softly. It's like, give me peace, but I don't want to give him justice. And this is not going to work. This is why you see the black man still fighting today for justice, because we didn't fight for it back then. All people, it was a statement by Prophet Muhammad in his last sermon. I would like to close with this. Prophet Muhammad, may Allah be pleased with him, said in his last statement, he said, we are all equal, and nobody has superiority over another except in piety and good action. So it does not exist that you're superior because of your knowledge or because of your money or because of your race or your nationality or your tribe. He says what makes you superior is your piety. You see? So this is a statement that was made 1,400 years ago by our beloved Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. May Allah be pleased with him. So I'd like to, the audience to know the compatibility between what was believed and taught by Prophet Muhammad, may Allah be pleased with him, and also what was taught by Malcolm X. Nothing new is under the sun. Thank you.
Yeah, just
Dr.
a couple
Brown,
quick comments.
Before you answer, I'd like to ask you, because we're about 5 minutes to close, and I'd like our listening audience to get some idea of what are the future goals for the present civil rights movement. From the time of Dr. Martin Luther King, I know you all would understand much more than me coming, being fairly new to this country. What has been accomplished, what exactly are the future goals of the civil rights organizations and movements in the United States of America for equality amongst everybody, and how are we going to go about accomplishing some of these goals? Which I think these are some very important questions that needs to be answered.
Okay. Yes, I certainly will get right to that, but I do want to quote Dr. King. True peace is not merely the absence of tension. It is the presence of justice. So it's absolutely right. Sometimes we take away the justice when we've made King a popular figure, but that wasn't what he stood for. Malcolm was an extremely important person in this country. He freed a lot of people's minds. I unfortunately never got a chance to meet him personally. I did know a number of people who knew him growing up and grew because they come from the Boston area, and that's where he came from. And I have a tremendous amount of admiration for the course of things that he did in his life and his value to the movement, particularly in the northern areas, and what he did to literally remove shackles from people's minds.
Right.
King is absolutely right. King himself said, when he talked about it is a power as old as the insights of Jesus of Nazareth and as modern as the techniques of Gandhi.
Of course.
And had he been talking about to a different audience, I'm sure in an audience perhaps as more knowledgeable as we see today, he would have referred to the Prophet Muhammad as well, because certainly the principles of Islam, the principles that are laid out so clearly in the first surah, are those that King would adhere to and connect with as part of the great Abrahamic tradition.
Absolutely.
Within much of what we have in the traditional civil rights movement, the real thing that we've moved the least on is economic justice and economic equality. That's the biggest area.
Economics. We have 1 minute left. Ted, I'd like you to have the last word.
Economic development, I think, is the key now. I think that's the next frontier for the black community, and justice. We still have to have that Martin Luther King group out there, and that group out there who would fight fearlessly to make sure that our civil rights is protected, because history tells you in America that it just have to be fought all the time. Constant battle.
Okay, I'd like to thank you all for listening. It's been a wonderful learning experience for me, and I hope for our listening audience this evening. I'd like to thank Ted from Truth of the Matter, Dr. Brown, and Brother Ishab. I'd like to thank you all for listening, and please tune in next week, inshallah, God willing. We'll have another discussion on Amana, the voice of trust. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace be with you.
Thank you.
لا إله إلا الله 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 created the plants and trees. He created the birds and bees. He created the oceans and seas. Some of his many bounties. He made us on earth trustees to obey all his decrees. Oh Allah, have mercy, please. Clean away our heart's disease. جل الله في علا ما لنا رب سوى. جل الله في علا ما لنا رب سوى. جل الله في علا ما لنا رب سوى. لا إله إلا الله. 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 لا إله إلا الله.
طلع البدر علينا من ثنيات الوداع وجب الشكر علينا ما دعا لله داع ما دعا لله داع. Oh, the white moon rose over us from the valley of Wada, and we owe it to show gratefulness where the call is to Allah, where the call is to Allah. أيها المبعوث فينا جئت بالعمر المطاع جئت شرفت المدينة مرحبا يا خير داع مرحبا يا خير داع. Oh, you who are amongst us, coming with a word to be obeyed, you have brought to the city nobleness. Welcome best scholars to God's way. Welcome best